The Galactic Council had ruled the known universe for 17,000 years. 12 ancient species sat upon the high tribunal, and their combined fleets numbered in the millions. Their territory spread across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. They had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. They had crushed rebellions and absorbed newcomers, and maintained order through overwhelming force and ancient treaties. Nothing surprised them anymore. Nothing challenged their authority. They believed they had seen everything the universe had to offer, so when the sensor arrays along the outer rim detected a small fleet of unknown vessels entering council space. Ambassador Cathorn of the Valanthe was a tall being with shimmering scales and 4 slender arms. He convened an emergency session aboard the Council's flagship called the Eternal Mandate, the great chamber filled with representatives from all 12 elder species. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing the sensor data from the outer rim. Fleet. Commander Zoreth stepped forward to deliver his report. He was a stocky Brahmalian with stone-gray skin and deep-set eyes that glowed faintly orange. His voice was deep and steady as he addressed the assembly. 17 vessels had been detected. Unknown configuration. Unknown propulsion signatures. They had emerged from uncharted space beyond the Kepler void. A murmur of concern rippled through the chamber. The Kepler void was a dead zone. It was a region of space so hostile that no known species had ever successfully crossed it. The radiation storms alone would destroy any vessel within days. The gravitational anomalies would tear ships apart. Every species that had attempted the crossing had vanished without a trace. It was simply impossible to survive. High Matriarch Selvani of the Earthen Collective spoke up from her position near the central platform. Her ethereal form flickered slightly, and this betrayed her agitation. She declared that nothing could survive the void. The radiation would destroy any organic life. The energy fields would overload any known shielding system. These vessels must have come from somewhere else. There must be some other explanation. Ambassador Cathorin pulled up the sensor data on the central holographic display. And yet here they are, he said calmly. The evidence was undeniable. 17 vessels had emerged from the direction of the Kepler void. Their trajectory was consistent with a direct crossing. There was no other logical point of origin. The vessels appeared on the main screen. They were unlike anything the Council had ever recorded. Angular and almost brutish in design. No elegant curves or energy-efficient shapes that marked advanced civilization. They looked primitive, almost crude, like something a species might build in its first few centuries of spaceflight. The assembled delegates studied the images with a mixture of confusion and amusement. Tormalone was the ancient keeper of records, and his voice wheezed through his respirator as he asked if they should be concerned. The vessels appeared to be unsophisticated. Surely they posed no threat to the might of the Galactic Council. Commander Zoroth magnified the lead vessel on the display. It appeared to be their flagship. Approximately 2 kilometers in length, he was detecting what appeared to be projectile weapons, chemical propulsion systems, and their whole composition made him pause. He checked his readings twice before continuing. Metal alloys. They had built their ships from metal alloys. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Even the most primitive species the Council had encountered used composite materials or energy shielding. Metal hulls had not been seen in serious naval construction for over 10,000 years. It was like discovering a civilization that still used wooden sailing ships. The idea was absurd. Perhaps they are refugees, suggested Salvani, with an amused shimmer in her form. Lost travelers from some forgotten colony. Primitive beings who had somehow stumbled into civilized space by accident. Ambassador Cathorin considered this possibility. It seemed the most logical explanation. He ordered the communications officer to open a channel. They would welcome these newcomers to civilized space and explain the protocols of the Galactic Council. They would assess whether these beings posed any threat and determine the appropriate response. Standard procedure for first contact with primitive species. The communications officer was a young Valanthe named Sorrel. She worked the console with practiced efficiency. After a moment, she looked up with confusion on her face. "Ambassador," she reported, They are already transmitting audio and visual. It appears to be music. Music, Cathorin repeated. That was unexpected. And a message, Sorrel continued. In approximately 470 different languages, including 6 of our own. The chamber fell silent. That was not the behavior of primitive refugees. A species that could decode and translate council communications in multiple languages was not unsophisticated. Something did not add up. The crude ships and the advanced linguistics did not match. Display it, Cathorin said quietly. The holographic screen shifted. A creature appeared seated in what appeared to be a command chair. It was bipedal with soft skin and 2 forward-facing eyes. It had a small nose and thin lips curved upward in an expression that none of the council members could quite interpret. It was smiling. "Greetings to the Galactic Council," the creature said. Its voice was calm and pleasant. "This is Captain Samuel Ellis of the Earth vessel Resilience. We come in peace and are eager to establish diplomatic relations. We have been watching your communications for some time and have prepared translation protocols. We hope this message finds you well." The creature paused and its smile widened slightly. "We look forward to meeting you. Please respond at your convenience." Resilience out. The transmission ended. The frozen image of the smiling creature remained on the screen. For a long moment, no one spoke. The chamber was completely silent. Every delegate stared at the strange being on the display. The smile was unsettling. It showed teeth. Among most council species, the display of teeth was a threat gesture. But this creature did not appear threatening. It appeared genuinely friendly. Welcoming, even. "They have been watching our communications," Tourmaline said slowly. His ancient voice was troubled. "That implies they have been in our space for some time." Undetected. Commander Zoroth muttered under his breath. 17 ships. 17 metal ships with projectile weapons? Watching us. The implications were disturbing. If these primitive vessels had avoided detection for any significant period, then Council security had failed in ways that demanded investigation. Ambassador Cathorin stared at the frozen image of the smiling creature on the screen. Something about that expression unsettled him in a way he could not quite define. It was not fear. It was not aggression. It was something else entirely. Confidence, perhaps? Or amusement. As if this Captain Samuel Ellis knew something the Council did not. "Prepare a response," Cathorin said finally. "Inform them that the Galactic Council welcomes all peaceful travelers, but they must submit to standard inspection protocols and register their species for membership consideration. We will treat them as we treat all newcomers until we understand what we are dealing with." He paused and looked around the chamber at his fellow delegates. Many of them still wore expressions of amusement. They saw only the primitive ships and the crude technology. They did not see what Cathorin was beginning to suspect. "And dispatch the Third Fleet to the Outer Rim," he added. "Full combat readiness, just as a precaution." The order was given. The Third Fleet would arrive in 3 days. 200 warships representing the finest military technology the Council had developed over 17,000 years. More than enough to deal with 17 primitive vessels, or so they believed, Ambassador. Cathorin looked once more at the image of Captain Samuel Ellis. The human was still smiling, patient, confident, completely unafraid. And that, more than anything else, was what worried him most. 3 days passed, and the Third Fleet of the Galactic Council arrived at the designated coordinates. 200 warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Each vessel was a masterpiece of advanced engineering developed over thousands of years. Their energy shields shimmered with protective fields that could withstand asteroid impacts. Their weapon systems hummed with barely contained power capable of destroying moons. They represented the combined might of 12 civilizations and 17,000 years of military development. Nothing in the known galaxy could stand against such a force. The 17 human vessels waited for them. They were arranged in a loose cluster that showed no apparent tactical formation, no defensive positioning, no attempt to flee or hide. They simply floated there as if they had been expecting company, and were in no particular hurry. Fleet Admiral Korvath, commanded the Third Fleet from the bridge of his flagship, the Unconquerable Fury. He was a veteran Bromalian commander with 40 years of service and countless battles behind him. He had crushed rebellions and destroyed pirate fleets and brought entire species to their knees. Nothing frightened him. Nothing surprised him anymore. Or so he had believed until he studied the alien ships on his view screen. Up close, they looked even more primitive than the sensor data had suggested. Exposed antenna arrays jutted from their hulls like afterthoughts. Visible seams showed where hull plates had been welded together by hand. And most shocking of all, they had windows. Actual transparent windows. Any competent naval architect knew that windows were structural weaknesses. Energy shields made them unnecessary. Yet these humans had built their ships with windows as if they wanted to look outside with their own eyes. "This is almost embarrassing," muttered his tactical officer. "We brought 200 warships to face this. Remain professional," Corvath replied. Though he privately agreed with the assessment, these vessels looked like museum pieces. Relics from an age before proper spaceflight had been developed. The idea that they had crossed the Kepler void was becoming harder to believe with every passing moment. "Open a channel to their lead vessel," Corvath ordered. The screen flickered, and another human appeared. This one was female, with dark hair pulled back tightly from her face. She had an easy, relaxed posture that seemed entirely inappropriate for someone facing 200 warships. She looked comfortable, almost bored, as if this situation was completely ordinary for her. "Admiral Corvath," she said pleasantly. "I am Commander Lisa Campbell of the Resilience. Captain Ellis sends his regards and asks if you would like to come aboard for refreshments while we discuss the inspection protocols." Corvath blinked. He was not certain he had heard correctly. "Refreshments," he repeated. "Coffee or tea or water or juice. We also have some pastries if you are interested. The captain's steward makes an excellent cinnamon roll." They are quite popular with the crew. The bridge crew exchanged confused glances. No one knew how to respond to such an offer. They had expected fear or defiance or attempts at negotiation, not an invitation for pastries. Commander Campbell, Corvath said carefully while choosing his words with precision. "You are currently surrounded by the Third Fleet of the Galactic Council. 200 warships with enough firepower to reduce a small moon to rubble. And you are offering me pastries." Lisa Campbell tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. "Is that a no to the cinnamon rolls?" she asked. Her tone suggested genuine curiosity rather than mockery. Corvath gathered himself and pushed forward with the official protocol. "I am here to conduct a mandatory inspection of your vessels, as required by Council law. You will power down your weapons and lower your shields and prepare to receive boarding parties, of course," Campbell said agreeably. "Though I should mention that we do not have shields, and our weapons are already powered down. We are not looking for trouble, Admiral. We are just here to say hello." Corvath frowned. The casual admission caught him off guard. "You have no shields?" he asked. "Metal hulls," Campbell said, with a slight shrug. "Old school. We like to keep things simple." The Admiral studied her face through the view screen. He searched for signs of deception or hidden fear. He found neither. The human woman looked genuinely relaxed. She might have been chatting with a neighbor about the weather, rather than negotiating with an alien armada that could destroy her entire fleet in seconds. "Very well," he said finally. "Prepare to receive boarding parties. My officers will conduct a thorough inspection of your vessels and your technology and your crew manifest." "Looking forward to it," Campbell said cheerfully. "I will let Captain Ellis know you are on your way. Resilience out." The screen went dark. Corvath sat in silence for a moment. His tactical officer shifted uncomfortably beside him. The bridge crew continued their work, but the atmosphere had changed. Something felt wrong. "Something did not make sense, sir," his tactical officer prompted. "Shall I prepare the boarding teams?" Corvath nodded slowly. "Something is wrong," he said quietly. "These creatures are facing the might of the Council, and they act as if they are welcoming guests to a social gathering. Perhaps they simply do not understand the danger they are in. Perhaps their species lacks the intelligence to recognize superior force. Perhaps Corvath stood and straightened his uniform. Or perhaps they understand something we do not. Prepare my shuttle. I will conduct this inspection personally. 30 minutes later, Admiral Corvath stood in the main corridor of the human vessel Resilience. 6 heavily armed Bromalian soldiers surrounded him as his security detail. Their weapons were charged and ready. Their eyes scanned every shadow for potential threats. They were professionals trained to expect danger in any situation. The interior of the ship was as strange as its exterior. Exposed pipes and conduits ran along the ceiling in plain view. Electrical wiring was visible behind transparent panels. The deck plating was simple metal grating that showed mechanical systems below. Everything was functional and utilitarian. No decoration. No elegance. Just machinery designed to work. Crew members walked past in simple uniforms. They nodded politely at the alien visitors as if their presence were completely ordinary. Some of them smiled. Others offered friendly greetings in broken Valanthi that they had clearly just learned. None of them showed any fear. None of them seemed concerned about the armed soldiers in their corridor. Captain Samuel Ellis met them near the central lift. He was a broad-shouldered man with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. He extended his hand in what appeared to be a greeting gesture. Admiral Corvath, welcome aboard. I hope the shuttle ride was comfortable. Corvath ignored the extended hand. It was adequate, he replied stiffly. Captain Ellis, I must inform you that the Galactic Council takes unauthorized incursions into its territory very seriously. Your presence here is a violation of sovereign space, we understand, Ellis said, while lowering his hand without apparent offense. And we apologize for any concern we may have caused. We honestly did not realize this region was claimed. Our maps of the galaxy are still a bit incomplete. Your maps, Corvath repeated. We have only been exploring for about 300 years. Still filling in the blanks? Corvath stared at him. 300 years? Your species has only been spacefaring for 3 centuries, give or take. We had some setbacks early on. Wars and climate issues and that sort of thing. But we got it sorted out eventually. 300 years. The Council had been spacefaring for 17,000. The idea that these primitive creatures had crossed the Kepler void with only 3 centuries of experience was absurd, impossible. Yet here they stood in their metal ship with their friendly smiles and their offers of pastries, completely unafraid. And Admiral Corvath was beginning to understand that impossible might not mean what he had always believed it meant. The inspection took 4 hours. Admiral Corvath and his team walked through every section of the Resilience. They examined the engine room and the weapon systems and the crew quarters and the medical bay. They scanned equipment and reviewed data logs and interviewed crew members. By the end of it, Corvath was no longer concerned about the human fleet. He was terrified, not because of what he had found, but because of what he could not explain. The human ships were exactly as primitive as they appeared. Metal hulls made from iron and steel alloys. Chemical rockets that burned fuel to generate thrust. Projectile weapons that fired solid metal slugs at high velocity. No shields. No energy weapons. No artificial gravity. The crew lived in rotating sections that simulated gravity through centrifugal force. They breathed the toxic oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere that would kill most Council species within minutes. They ate solid food that they prepared by heating it with fire in a room they called a galley. Everything about them was crude and outdated and impossible, and yet they had crossed the Kepler void. They had observed Council communications for years without detection. Their 17 primitive vessels showed no signs of unusual wear or damage beyond normal operational stress. They had done the impossible with technology that should not have worked. I do not understand, Corvath said. He stood in the small conference room aboard the Resilience with Captain Ellis and Commander Campbell. His security team waited outside the door. He had ordered them to leave because he did not want them to see his confusion. Your technology is primitive. Your ship should not be capable of interstellar travel, let alone surviving the void. How is this possible? Ellis leaned back in his chair. He seemed comfortable and relaxed, as he had been since the beginning. Admiral, I think there might be a misunderstanding about what primitive means. Your ships are made of metal. You use chemical propulsion. You have no shields. All true. But our ships work. They get us where we need to go, and they keep us alive while we are getting there. Ellis smiled. We have a saying on Earth, if it is not broken, do not fix it. But you have no defensive capabilities. A single volley from one of my cruisers would destroy your entire fleet. Probably, Ellis agreed. His tone was casual, as if they were discussing the weather. But why would you want to do that? Corvath opened his mouth to respond. Then he closed it. He realized he did not have a good answer. The humans had done nothing aggressive. They had not threatened anyone. They had not demanded anything. They had simply arrived and said hello and offered pastries. Let me ask you something, Admiral, Campbell said. She leaned forward in her chair, and her eyes were sharp and focused. In the 17,000 years the Council has existed, how many wars have you fought? Hundreds, Corvath replied. Possibly thousands. The Council has maintained order through strength and vigilance. And how many of those wars did you start? The question hung in the air. Corvath felt something cold settle in his stomach. He knew the answer. Every officer in the fleet knew the answer. But no one ever spoke it aloud. We looked through your historical records, Campbell continued. Public records. Nothing classified. And we noticed something interesting. Almost every major conflict in Council history was started by the Council. Preemptive strikes against species that might become threats. Punitive expeditions against colonies that failed to pay tribute. Interventions to remove governments that the Council found inconvenient. That is a simplified interpretation, Corvath said. But his voice lacked conviction. Maybe. But here's the thing, Admiral. We humans have fought plenty of wars. Too many. We almost destroyed ourselves a few times. Nuclear weapons. Climate collapse. Diseases we created by accident. We came very close to extinction more than once. Campbell paused, and her expression softened. But we learned something important along the way. What did you learn? Corvath asked. The strongest position is not having the biggest weapons. It is not needing to use them. Ellis nodded. We did not come here looking for a fight. We came here because we were curious. We wanted to meet you. Learn about you. Maybe trade some ideas and share some stories. That is all. Corvath studied the two humans. They seemed sincere. Their body language showed no signs of deception. Their heart rates were elevated slightly, but within normal parameters for their species. They were telling the truth. Or at least, they believed they were telling the truth. And if the Council decides you are a threat, Corvath asked, if we determine that your species must be contained or eliminated for the safety of civilized space. Ellis and Campbell exchanged a look. Something passed between them, an understanding that Corvath could not quite read. Then Ellis smiled again. But this time Corvath saw something behind that smile that was not friendly. It was patient, confident, almost amused. Like a predator watching prey that did not yet realize it was being hunted, Admiral Ellis said quietly, "We crossed the Kepler void in ships made of metal using technology you consider obsolete. We survived radiation that would kill your entire crew in hours. We watched your communications for 3 years and you never knew we were there." He leaned forward. His eyes met Corvath's and held them. "If the Council decides we are a threat, you are welcome to try to eliminate us. But I would strongly recommend reconsidering." The room was silent. Corvath could hear his own heartbeat. He could hear the soft hum of the ship's systems. He could hear his security team shifting their weight outside the door. But he could not hear any threat in Ellis's voice. Only certainty. Only the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were capable of. "That sounds like a threat, Captain," Corvath said. "No," Ellis replied. "It is just information. What you do with it is up to you." Corvath sat back in his chair. His mind was racing. He had come aboard expecting to find primitive refugees who needed to be educated about Council protocols. Instead, he had found something else entirely. A species that looked weak, but was not. A species that seemed friendly but carried an edge of steel beneath the smiles. A species that had done the impossible and acted as if it were nothing special. "Captain Ellis," he said finally, "I will deliver my report to the council. They will decide how to proceed." "Of course," Ellis said. His friendly smile returned as if the previous moment had never happened. "Take your time. We are not going anywhere." "And Admiral, yes, the offer for cinnamon rolls still stands. You really should try one before you leave." Corvath stood. He straightened his uniform and walked to the door. His security team fell in around him as he made his way back to the shuttle bay. None of them spoke. None of them needed to. They had all seen the same thing. They had all felt the same chill. The humans were not refugees. They were not lost travelers. They were something new, something the council had never encountered before, and Corvath was not certain the council was ready for it, what that meant. Admiral Corvath's report reached the Galactic Council within hours. The delegates gathered in the great chamber aboard the Eternal Mandate to hear his findings. They expected confirmation that the humans were primitive and harmless. They expected reassurance that the council's dominance remained unchallenged. What they received was something very different. Corvath stood before the assembly and delivered his report without emotion. He described the metal ships and the chemical rockets and the projectile weapons. He described the oxygen atmosphere and the rotating gravity sections and the food prepared with fire. He described everything he had observed in precise detail. And then he described the conversation in the conference room, the questions about council history, the quiet warning from Captain Ellis, the confidence that seemed to have no visible source. The chamber erupted in outrage. Insolence declared High Matriarch Selvani. Her ethereal form blazed with anger. "These primitives dare to threaten us. We should destroy their fleet immediately and send a clear message to any other species that might consider such arrogance." "I second the motion," said Commander Zorith. His stone-gray face was hard with contempt. "Our weapons are superior in every way. This would be over in minutes. We would lose nothing and gain respect throughout the galaxy." Ambassador Cathoran held up a hand for silence. He had read Corvath's report carefully before the session. Something about it troubled him deeply. Not the facts themselves, but the tone. Corvath was a veteran commander who had faced death many times. He was not easily frightened. Yet his report contained words like unusual and unexplained and concerning. Words that suggested the Admiral had encountered something he did not fully understand. "Admiral Corvath," Cathoran said, "in your professional assessment, what would happen if we engaged the human fleet?" Corvath hesitated before answering. "Militarily speaking, we would win. Our firepower is overwhelming, and they have no effective defense against our weapons. But," Cathoran prompted, "but I am not certain victory would be meaningful, Ambassador. These creatures are different. They think differently. They react differently." Corvath paused, as if searching for the right words. "During my inspection, I tested their response to stress by having my soldiers aim weapons at their crew. Do you know what the humans did?" "What?" Cathoran asked. They laughed. One of them made a joke about needing to update their life insurance. Another offered my soldier a beverage. Silence fell over the chamber. The delegates looked at each other with uncertainty. Laughter was not a normal response to loaded weapons. Fear was normal. Anger was normal. Submission was normal. But laughter suggested something else entirely. "They were not afraid," Corvath continued. "Not because they are foolish or naive, but because they genuinely did not perceive us as a threat. And that, Ambassador, concerns me more than anything else I observed." "Ridiculous," Zorith snapped. "They are simply too ignorant to understand their danger. I recommend we demonstrate our power. One volley. Destroy one of their vessels, and they will learn to fear us." Catch a single quote, Zorith considered this proposal. Part of him agreed with Zorith. A show of force had resolved countless situations in the Council's history. Fear was an effective tool for maintaining order. But another part of him wondered if this situation was different. The humans had done the impossible by crossing the void. They had watched Council communications for years without detection. Perhaps they knew something the Council did not. Very well, he said finally. Commander Zorith, you may proceed with a demonstration. One vessel. Make it quick and decisive. With pleasure, Ambassador, the Third Fleet positioned itself around the human vessels. The 17 metal ships made no attempt to flee or take defensive positions. They simply waited. On the bridge of the unconquerable Fury, Admiral Corvath watched as his weapons officers locked onto one of the smaller human ships. It was a vessel called the Intrepid. A science vessel, according to human designations. Minimal crew. Minimal value. A perfect target for demonstration. Target acquired, reported the weapons officer. Ready to fire on your command? Corvath looked at the view screen. The Intrepid sat motionless against the stars. No evasive maneuvers. No attempt to power up weapons. On his communication console, a light blinked, indicating an incoming transmission from the human flagship. Admiral, Captain Ellis's voice said calmly, I see you are targeting one of our science vessels. I would appreciate if you did not do that, Captain Ellis the Galactic. Council has determined that a demonstration of our capabilities is necessary to establish proper diplomatic protocols. One of your vessels will be destroyed. This is not negotiable, I understand. But I am asking you, Admiral, please do not. There was something in Ellis's voice. Not fear, not anger. Almost sadness. As if he knew what was about to happen and regretted it. As if he had hoped for a different outcome. Fire, Corvath ordered. The unconquerable Fury's main battery discharged. A beam of concentrated plasma lanced across space toward the Intrepid. The beam was hot enough to melt through a kilometer of solid rock. It had destroyed battleships and space stations and asteroids. Nothing could withstand such power. And then the beam stopped. It simply stopped. Suspended in space about 100 meters from the human vessel's hull, the plasma hung there for a moment, glowing, pulsing, and then it dissipated, harmlessly into nothing. The bridge crew stared in stunned silence. What happened? Zoroff's voice crackled over the command channel. Why did the beam not impact? I do not know, Commander, the weapons officer stammered. There is nothing on sensors. No shield, no countermeasure. No energy field. The beam just stopped. On the communication channel, Captain Ellis sighed. It was a heavy sound. Tired and disappointed. Admiral Corvath, I really wish you had not done that. How? Corvath demanded. You have no shields. No defensive systems. How did you stop our weapon? I told you, Admiral. We are a bit stubborn. There was a pause. And we do not like bullies. On the view screen, the human vessels began to move. Not quickly. Not aggressively. But with a kind of casual precision that suggested they could move much faster if they chose. They repositioned themselves and formed a loose sphere around the Third Fleet. 200. Council warships now sat inside a ring of 17 metal vessels. Admiral, the sensor officer reported. His voice was shaking. I am detecting energy readings from the human vessels. Readings that were not there before. What kind of readings? I do not know how to describe them, sir. They are off the scale. All of our scales. Ellis's voice came through again. Still calm. Still almost friendly. Admiral, please tell your fleet to stand down. We are not going to hurt anyone. But I think we need to have a longer conversation about how this first contact is going to work. Corvath looked at his tactical display. 200 warships surrounded by 17 primitive vessels. And yet somehow he knew with absolute certainty that if this became a fight, his fleet would not survive. He did not know how he knew, but he knew. All ships stand down, he ordered quietly. Power down weapons and hold position. Admiral Zorith's voice was incredulous. You cannot be serious. We are the Third Fleet of the Galactic Council. We do not surrender to privers. We are not surrendering, Commander. We are reconsidering our approach. On the view screen, Captain Ellis smiled. It was the same friendly smile he had worn since the beginning. But now Corvath understood. What was behind it? Patience, confidence, and the quiet certainty of a species that had already figured out things. the council had not even imagined. "Thank you, Admiral," Ellis said. "Now about those cinnamon rolls." 1 week later, Captain Samuel Ellis stood before the full assembly of the Galactic Council in their great chamber aboard the Eternal Mandate. 12 elder species filled the room. Hundreds of delegates watched from their seats. Thousands of years of combined history and power focused on a single human in a simple uniform. The atmosphere was tense. The failed attack had shaken the Council to its core. For the first time in 17,000 years, they faced something they could not. Overwhelmed with force, Ambassador Cathorin presided over the session. He had spent the past week reviewing every piece of data they had collected on humanity. He had read every report and analyzed every scan and studied every recording. And he had reached a disturbing conclusion. The Galactic Council had fundamentally misunderstood what it was dealing with. These were not primitive refugees. These were not lost colonists. These were something entirely new. Captain Ellis Cathorin began. "We have many questions, but I will start with the most important one. What are you?" Ellis stood calmly before the assembly. He showed no nervousness, no fear. He looked like a man who had done this many times before. "We are human beings," he said. "Species designation Homo sapiens. Native to a small planet called Earth, third world of an unremarkable star system in what you call the Outer Rim. That is not what I mean. Your technology appears primitive, yet you stopped our most powerful weapon without apparent effort. Your ships should not function, yet they crossed the Kepler void. Your body should not survive, yet your crew walked through radiation zones that would kill any known species. What are you really?" Ellis was quiet for a moment. He seemed to be considering his words carefully. Every delegate in the chamber leaned forward. "They all wanted to hear the answer, Ambassador," Ellis said finally. "The Galactic Council has had 17,000 years to develop its technology. You have mastered energy shields and hyperspace travel and plasma weapons and artificial gravity. You are by any reasonable measure far more advanced than us. And yet," Cathorin prompted, "and yet you have made some assumptions along the way that limited your thinking. You assumed that advanced meant complex, that powerful meant energy-based, that survival meant avoiding danger." Ellis paused. "We took a different path. Explain." "Humans evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill us. Predators hunted us. Diseases ravaged us. Natural disasters destroyed our homes. Extreme temperatures pushed us to the edge of survival. We did not survive by avoiding danger. We survived by adapting to it, by becoming tougher than our environment, by refusing to give up even when giving up was the logical choice." He gestured around the chamber at the assembled delegates. "Your species developed shields because you wanted to avoid damage. We developed hull materials that could absorb damage and keep functioning. Your species developed energy weapons because you wanted to project power at a distance. We developed projectiles because sometimes you need a weapon that works when the power goes out. Your species developed hyperspace travel because you wanted to avoid the dangers of normal space. We developed ships that could survive those dangers because we knew that sometimes there is no." Shortcut High Matriarch Selvani spoke up from her position. Her ethereal form flickered with uncertainty. "And the Kepler void, the radiation. We flew through it," Ellis said simply. "It was hard. Some of our crew got sick. A few died. But we made it because that is what humans do. We pushed through." He met her eyes. "We are not more advanced than you, Ambassador. We are just more stubborn." The chamber was silent. The delegates looked at each other with expressions that ranged from disbelief to fear to something that might have been respect. No species had ever spoken to the Council this way. No species had ever stood before them with such quiet confidence. Cathorin leaned forward. "Captain Ellis, what do you want?" "Why are you here?" "We want to be friends," Ellis said. His voice was sincere. "We want to trade, share knowledge, learn from each other. We have been alone in our corner of the galaxy for 300 years, and honestly, we are a little tired of it. The universe is a big place, and it is more interesting with company. And if we decide we do not want your friendship, if we determine that humanity is a threat to galactic stability, Ellis's smile faded slightly. Then we will leave. We will go back to our space and we will continue on our own. We will not start a war with you, Ambassador. That is not who we are. But you would finish one. The smile returned. But there was something behind it now. Something old and patient and very determined. Something that spoke of ancestors who had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly ended their species. Something that had been forged in struggle and hardened by loss and tempered by hope. We are human, Ellis said quietly. We finish everything we start. The vote took 3 hours. Delegates argued and debated and questioned. Some demanded that humanity be destroyed before they became too powerful. Others argued that such an attempt would be foolish given the failed attack. Still others suggested that humanity might be a valuable ally in future conflicts. The discussion went back and forth across the chamber. In the end, it was not even close. The Galactic Council voted to accept humanity not as a subject, not as a tributary, but as an equal partner. It was the first time in 17,000 years that such an offer had been made. The decision was controversial, but the logic was simple. Humanity had demonstrated capabilities that the Council did not understand, and the Council had learned through long experience that it was better to befriend what you could not comprehend than to make an enemy of it. Captain, Ellis signed the partnership agreement with a simple pen. No holographic signatures. No biometric confirmations. Just ink on paper. The way humans had been making promises for thousands of years. This is a good day, Ambassador, Cathoran said afterward. They stood together on the observation deck of the Eternal Mandate. Below them, the human fleet and the Third Fleet orbited together. No longer adversaries, it is? Ellis agreed. I hope it is the first of many, Captain, I must ask. When we fired on your vessel, what stopped the beam? Ellis looked out at the stars. His expression was thoughtful. You know what really separates humans from most species, Ambassador? We do not believe it impossible. Someone tells us something cannot be done, and our first instinct is to figure out how to do it anyway. That does not answer my question. No, it does not. Ellis smiled. But I think some mysteries are good for a relationship. Keeps things interesting. Catherine stared at the human for a long moment. Then slowly he began to laugh. It was a strange sound. Unfamiliar to his own vocal cords, but somehow appropriate. I think humanity is going to be very interesting indeed, he said. You have no idea, Ellis replied. Now about those cinnamon rolls. 50 years later, the galaxy looked very different. Human technology had not replaced Council technology, but it had complemented it in unexpected ways. Ships now carried both energy shields and reinforced hulls. Weapon systems included both plasma cannons and kinetic projectiles. And in the great halls of the Eternal Mandate, human coffee had become unexpectedly popular. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had not needed to. They had simply shown up and been friendly and demonstrated that they were not to be trifled with, and then made themselves useful. It was the human way. On the observation deck where the partnership had begun, a new generation stood watching the stars. Commander Daniel Ellis was the grandson of the legendary captain. Ambassador Salvani the Younger was descendant of the High Matriarch who had once called for humanity's destruction. They stood together as friends. As proof that first impressions could change, my grandfather used to tell me stories about the first contact, Daniel said. He said the Council expected us to be afraid, to bow down or fight back or run away. And instead, Salvani asked. Daniel smiled. It was the same smile his grandfather had worn, patient, confident, amused. Instead, we offered them cinnamon rolls. Salvani laughed. It was a sound her ancestor had never made, but one that had become common in the decades since humans arrived. And look where it got you, she said. Partners in the greatest alliance the galaxy has ever known. That is the thing about humans, Daniel said. We are really good at making friends, and really bad at staying down when someone tries to knock us out. Your grandfather called it stubbornness. He did. We prefer to call it hope. Daniel raised his coffee cup in a toast. To the next 50 years, Salvani raised her own cup. To the next 50 years, and to the species that crossed the impossible void and taught us that sometimes the best response to fear is a smile and a pastry. They drank together. Two species that had nearly gone to war, now united by something stronger than treaties or weapons: friendship, curiosity, and an inexplicable human talent for showing up where they were not expected and making themselves at home. The galaxy would never be the same, and humanity would not have it any other way.